Horror video games. Those two words together have brought me so much joy in my life. Welcome to my channel. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, I'm going to let you know that I talk about horror video games all the time. And I thought I would do something different with this video, something fun, something I don't typically do. And that was show you guys every single horror video game that I own in my personal collection. I thought this would be a cool idea because it would let you guys see some games that you might not know exist. Or you could recommend me new games after watching this video if you notice there's certain series or certain video games that I don't own yet. But anyway, let's get into this video. But before I do, you should consider subscribing. Like I already mentioned, I talk about survival horror games all the time, but I also do TV show discussions, trailer reactions, movie discussions, that sort of thing. But anyway, let's get into this collection because there's a lot here. I'm going to start first with PlayStation 1 games, and that's actually how I'm going to break up this video, is by console. The first game that I want to show off is one of the rarest games in my collection, and that is Silent Hill 1 on the PlayStation 1. Most Silent Hill games can sell now for over $150, and this is definitely one of the more rare ones, especially since it has the black logo and not the Greatest Hits logo. I absolutely love Silent Hill. You can't really tell, but my shirt is Silent Hill. Now let's get into the Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1 with the OG, the original Resident Evil. All my Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1 I actually have in this really cool packaging that I don't remember where I got this. I think it was Etsy. But it's really cool. It's custom artwork and the back is really cool. But I think these just look nicer on a shelf than your typical CD case of a PlayStation 1 game. But we have Resident Evil 1 and we have Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut. This is actually the version of the game that I grew up with. Resident Evil 2, the original, arguably one of the best, if not the best Resident Evil games of all time, and one of the best survival horror games of all time. And then of course Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. I think this game is seriously underrated. But yeah, I just really love this packaging for the PlayStation 1 games. You can't really, maybe you can, but there's also artwork on the inside of it. And then the last game on the PlayStation 1 is Resident Evil Survivor, one of the most forgotten Resident Evil games of all time. So that's it with PlayStation 1. Now let's get into PlayStation 2 with my personal favorite horror game of all time and one of the top 5 games that I've ever played, and that is Silent Hill 2. Playing this game for the first time just absolutely opened up my mind in terms of what horror gaming could be and just what horror in general could be. Silent Hill shattered memories. I remember I bought this probably 10 years ago for I think $20 at GameStop, and now this one sells for an ungodly amount of money. Silent Hill Origins, super underrated. I really love this game. And then of course Silent Hill 3, and this version does include the soundtrack and the manual. Actually, most of my games include the manual. And then last, but in my opinion not least, Silent Hill 4, The Room, another underrated, overlooked horror game. Now let's return to some Resident Evil. With Resident Evil Code Veronica X, they desperately need to remake this game. Resident Evil Dead Aim, a game not a lot of people know exists. It's only like 2.5 hours long, but if you can find it for like $30, if you're a hardcore Resident Evil fan, definitely go buy it. The OG Resident Evil 4, one of the 2 or 3 top games in my life. Unfortunately, this is the Greatest Hits version. I prefer to have the black label. And then Resident Evil Outbreak and Resident Evil Outbreak Files 2. Now let's get into some PlayStation 2 games that aren't Resident Evil or Silent Hill. And the first one being Cold Fear. A great game. Not a lot of people have heard about it. You should go play this, especially if you love Resident Evil 4, especially if you love Dead Space. The Thing. I actually bought this game last summer. I absolutely love the original John Carpenter movie, but I have not played this yet. Obscure: The Aftermath. I do not have the first Obscure game, unfortunately. Ghost Hunter. Surprisingly fun. Evil Dead: A Fistful of Boomstick. I absolutely loved this game as a kid. There's actually another Evil Dead game on PlayStation 2 called, I believe it's Evil Dead Regeneration, I believe. I do not own that game, but I actually saw it at the store 2 or 3 weeks ago for $35, and I was this close to buying it, and I really wish I did because I actually went back to go get it the day after and it was gone, and now I'm sad. And then the final game on the PS2 that I want to show you is Jaws Unleashed. This is one of those games that it's not really a horror game, but horror fans embrace this and it fits perfectly on a horror video game shelf. And now I'm going to show you only 2 GameCube games that I own, and that is Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 Remake. Now I'm gonna rapid fire through just a very small batch of Xbox 360 games that I own. The first being Rain Vampire, or Vampire Rain. I actually have not played this game, but I got it at a pawn shop when I got my Xbox 360, and it looks horror. The original Alan Wake. If you have not played this game and you call yourself a horror fan, go play it. The original Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, and Left 4 Dead 2. And now we find ourselves in the PS3 era. And the first game I'm going to show you here is Silent Hill Homecoming, another underrated game. And while we're talking about this, of course, we have to talk about Silent Hill Downpour. Yes, I sound like a broken record, but this game is also underrated. Maybe I'm just a Silent Hill fanboy. Who am I kidding? I am a Silent Hill fanboy, but I do think these games are worth playing, and I think they get far too much hate. And unfortunately, these are actually the last Silent Hill games in my collection because they haven't released one since Silent Hill Downpour. And now we're back to Resident Evil with Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil Revelations, and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. I had a lot of fun with this game when I was a kid. Of course, it's not that great. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that it's underrated. It's not, but I personally had a lot of fun with this one. Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2, and Dead Space 3. One of these games is really, really amazing. The other one is an incredible sequel. And then there's the third one. Not a lot of people know that these next games exist. Whenever I talk about them, a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about, but they're really fun, and they're also made by Konami that makes Silent Hill. So especially if you like Silent Hill, you should check these ones out. And that is Saw and Saw 2 Flesh and Blood. They're not perfect. They're not amazing. Unfortunately, they do sell for quite a bit of money these days. But if you can find them for a decent price, I do recommend you check them out. The Last of Us on PS3, not really a horror game, but it's got zombies and it's got a lot of creepy moments. The Walking Dead Survival Instinct and The Walking Dead Season 1, the Telltale game. Dead Rising 2, I actually decided to get this one on PS3 as opposed to Xbox 360. Dead Island. When this game came out for about a year afterwards, I considered this to be my favorite game ever. Looking back on it, it was just recency bias, but it does hold a special place in my heart. Fear 1, Fear 2, and Fear 3. Fear 2 in particular is incredible. I absolutely love the narrative in this game. It's definitely worth playing just for the plot alone. And then Aliens vs. Predator and Aliens Colonial Marines. Again, not a horror game, but horror fans really embrace this IP. Now I'm just going to rapid fire through the very few Xbox One games that I own. The first being Dead Rising 3. Zombie Army 4 Dead War. I actually own the Zombie Army trilogy, but I own it digitally. State of Decay, one of my favorite zombie games of all time. If you're a Walking Dead fan, this game is practically Walking Dead the game without being licensed. It's absolutely incredible, and its sequel, State of Decay 2, is also really good. And now we're into PS4 games, The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2. A lot of people prefer this game, and it is really, really good, but I will die on the hill that Evil Within 1 is far better. It's incredibly good, and it was written off by a lot of people very early on because of technical issues, but this game is a 10 out of 10 survival horror game, at least in my opinion. Outlast Trinity, Until Dawn, very, very, very good game. And then Man of Medan and Little Hope. I didn't enjoy these games nearly as much as Until Dawn. And I haven't played any other Dark Pictures games after Little Hope. It's the last one I played. We're back to Resident Evil, and you're going to start to see some remasters and some remakes here, but Resident Evil Origins Collection. This is Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 Remake. Resident Evil 2 Remake. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resident Evil 4 Remastered, Resident Evil 5 Remastered, Resident Evil 6 Remastered, and Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. And then lastly, Resident Evil Revelations 2. Revelations 1 is the only game that I don't have remastered on the PS4 that has a physical release, but I hope to change that soon. Daymare. I have not played this game, but the sequel that's coming out pretty soon looks pretty good. Days Gone, DayZ, and 7 Days to Die. These are multiplayer games. Dead Rising 1 Remastered. The Last of Us Part 2. Walking Dead Season 2, and then The Walking Dead Definitive Collection. Dead by Daylight, arguably my favorite multiplayer game of all time. I have an ungodly amount of hours into this game. Dying Light. A lot of people love this game. I did not. The Order 1886. Again, not really a horror game, but it's got werewolves, and it's got a lot of dark imagery and dark tones. And then Predator Hunting Grounds, another isometrical horror game, but It's Predator. Horror fans love Predator. We're now into the final category, and that is PlayStation 5, and the first game is Alan Wake Remastered. The Quarry. I did not like this game as much as Until Dawn, but it was far, far better than any of the Dark Pictures games that I played. The Medium. I did not love this game despite how much I wanted to, and I'm honestly kind of nervous that these developers are making the Silent Hill 2 remake, though I remain optimistic. The Last of Us Part 1, the remaster that's marketed as a remake. The Callisto Protocol and Dead Space remake. Resident Evil 4 remake and Resident Evil 8 Village. Dying Light 2. I know I'm in the minority and I might be the only person on this earth who thinks this, but I found this game to be far more enjoyable than the first Dying Light. The gameplay seemed funner, it seemed less grindy. Evil Dead the game. I was so hyped when this game came out. I pre-ordered it. I don't often do that. But I'm gonna be honest, after playing this game for about 10 hours, it just became so boring and so repetitive. Back 4 Blood, but last but not least, at least not least in my opinion, but maybe in some of your guys' opinions, and that's Aliens Fireteam Elite and Aliens Dark Descent. And that's it. That's all the horror games in my physical video game collection, but obviously I have a lot more digitally. I always buy physical if I have the choice, but a lot of horror games just don't get physical releases, like Amnesia the Bunker. And then there are some other horror games that I never would have played if it wasn't for them being on sale drastically digitally for like $2. But anyway, let me know, are there any video games that you just saw in this video that you had no idea existed that you're now going to seek out for yourself? And also let me know if there's a game that wasn't in this collection that you're surprised to see that I don't have. Let me know in the comments what game that is, because for all you know, I don't know it exists, and maybe I'll love it. But thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far, and once again, consider subscribing. I talk about horror games all the time, but I also do trailer reactions, TV show discussions, movie discussions, that sort of thing. Goodbye, and see you next time, I hope.